Let me ask you a blunt question. When someone talks to you, your partner, your kid, your boss, are you really listening, or are you just waiting for your turn to talk? Because there's a difference. One builds connection, the other builds walls. And if you've been wondering why your relationships feel misunderstood, I'll bet you're guilty of listening with your mouth instead of your ears. Here's the truth. Most people think they're good listeners, but they're not. They're distracted half in the conversation, half in their own head, or already planning their rebuttal. Listening isn't about being quiet while the other person speaks. It's about actually hearing them, processing what they mean, and showing them that they matter. If you don't master this, you will keep miscommunicating. You will keep fighting battles that could have been avoided, and you will keep making the people in your life feel unheard. Presence beats performance. That's the first real key to mastering active listening. Most people don't realize that when they sit across from someone, what the other person wants isn't a polished response, clever advice, or a well-rehearsed nod at just the right time. They want presence. They want to feel like in that moment, nothing else matters except them and what they're saying. And let me tell you, this is where a lot of people fail miserably. They're busy faking engagement, smiling, nodding, maybe throwing in and ho here and there while their mind is already 10 steps ahead, planning what they're going to say next, checking their phone, or thinking about the work they still have to finish. That's performance, not presence, and people can feel the difference a mile away. Think about it. When was the last time someone gave you their undivided attention? No phone in their hand, no glancing at the TV, no half-hearted, yeah, I hear you, while scrolling through emails, just full-on eyes-locked body, leaning in like you were the only person in the world. My guess is you can remember it vividly because it probably doesn't happen very often. And when it did, didn't it feel powerful? Didn't it make you feel important, valued, maybe even loved? That's the kind of impact presence has. It sticks. It's memorable. It leaves people thinking, wow, they really heard me. Now flip it around. If that's how you felt, why wouldn't you want to give that to the people you care about? But here's the reality check. You can't be present if you're not intentional. Presence doesn't just happen, you have to choose it. It means shutting down distractions, silencing that voice in your head that's rehearsing your rebuttal, and actually committing to hearing the other person out. It's about being willing to put yourself on pause so you can play full volume on them. And let's be clear, this isn't just for relationships or family talks. This matters in business and leadership and friendships. You want respect at work, you want loyalty from your team. Try giving them your presence. People follow leaders who make them feel seen, not ones who talk over them with some polished speech. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but I don't have time for all that. I can't give everyone my undivided attention. And my response is, no, you don't have time to not do it. Because here's what happens when you don't show up with presence. People feel ignored, disrespected, or dismissed. They walk away thinking you don't care. And over time, that builds walls. Your partner starts to shut down and stops telling you how they feel. Your kids stop coming to you because they think you're always too busy. Your coworkers check out emotionally because they feel like their input doesn't matter. So while you may think you're saving time by multitasking or half listening, what you're really doing is creating problems that will cost you far more time and energy later. Let's cut the excuses. Presence isn't about giving up hours. It's about what you do in minutes. 5 minutes of undivided, laser-focused attention is more powerful than 30 minutes of distracted listening. If you can give someone just a small pocket of your full attention, they will feel it. They will know you're invested. And that's worth more than pretending to care while your mind is elsewhere. Presence is about quality, not quantity. Another thing, people confuse presence with performance all the time. They think nodding at the right time or repeating a few words back is enough. That's not presence, that's acting. You can't fake being there. People have an uncanny sense for detecting when someone's not really with them. They can tell when your eyes glaze over, when your responses are too generic, when your tone is flat. And once they sense that, trust starts to erode. You're not fooling anyone. If you're not there mentally, your body language will give you away. That's why presence has to be genuine. It's not about pretending to listen. It's about actually listening. Here's the kicker. Being present is not only a gift to the other person, it's a gift to yourself. When you commit to being fully present, you start experiencing life in real time. Instead of living on autopilot, you notice details you would have missed. You hear the emotion behind someone's words. You catch opportunities that would have slipped right past you if you were distracted. Presence sharpens your awareness. It makes your interactions richer, deeper, more meaningful, and that translates into stronger relationships, better decisions, and less regret. So what does it look like to live out this principle? It's simple. When someone speaks to you, stop what you're doing. Put down the phone, close the laptop, turn your chair toward them, make eye contact, listen without interrupting. Don't just wait for a pause to jump in with your story. And here's the big one, don't treat listening like a performance where your goal is to look like you're engaged. Instead, treat it like a moment of connection where your goal is to actually be engaged. That shift changes everything. Presence beats performance. Performance is about you and presence is about them. Performance says, look at me, I'm such a good listener. Presence says, I see you, I hear you, you matter. And if you want to build trust, respect, and deeper connection in your life, you've got to quit the performance and start showing up with presence. Clarity over assumption is one of the most important disciplines you can master if you want to improve your ability to listen actively and build better relationships. The truth is, most conflicts, arguments, and misunderstandings don't come from what was actually said. They come from what was assumed. People hear one sentence, filter it through their own beliefs, biases, and insecurities, and then create a story in their head that often has little to do with reality. And here's the problem. Once you've built a story in your head, you start reacting to that story as if it's true, not to the actual words that came out of the other person's mouth. That's how small issues turn into big ones. That's how a comment like, you didn't take out the trash, turns into, you don't respect me, you don't value me, you never help me with anything. That escalation doesn't come from clarity, it comes from assumption. When you operate on assumption instead of clarity, you're playing a dangerous game because you're filling in blanks that were never yours to fill. You're deciding what the other person meant without checking with them. And the kicker is, most people don't even realize they're doing it. They just run on autopilot. Someone sighs in the middle of a conversation, and suddenly you assume they're annoyed with you. Someone doesn't return your text quickly, and you assume they're ignoring you or mad at you. Someone gives you feedback at work, and you assume they're attacking you personally instead of trying to help. Assumptions are mental shortcuts, but they are almost always the wrong road. They destroy trust, create unnecessary drama, and leave both sides feeling unheard. Clarity, on the other hand, is about slowing down and asking instead of assuming. It's about recognizing that your interpretation is not the same as their intention. You may have heard the words, but you haven't grasped the meaning until you check in with the other person. Getting clarity is as simple as asking questions. When you said that, what did you mean? Can you help me understand what you're feeling right now? I want to make sure I understood. Are you saying that? Those small, simple, clarifying questions can save hours of fighting, days of silent treatment, and even years of resentment. People don't get upset when you ask them to clarify. They get upset when you assume wrong and react based on your version of the story. Now, a lot of people resist this because they feel like asking for clarity makes them look weak, slow, or insecure. They think they should just know what someone means, especially in close relationships. But here's the reality. Clarity isn't weakness, it's strength. It takes courage to admit you don't fully understand and to make sure you get it right. It takes humility to put your ego aside and ask instead of assuming. And it takes maturity to realize that miscommunication is not a sign of failure. It's a normal part of human interaction. The strongest people, the best leaders, and the healthiest partners are the ones who check in, not the ones who pretend they have it all figured out. Let's take a real-world example. Imagine your boss sends you a short email that just says, "We need to talk tomorrow." If you're living in assumption mode, your mind might race, "I'm in trouble, I must have messed up, maybe they're unhappy with me, maybe I'm getting fired." By the time tomorrow comes, you're already defensive, stressed, and maybe even resentful. But what if all your boss meant was that they want to update you on a new opportunity or project? You've just created unnecessary suffering out of thin air because you didn't have clarity. A quick question, sure, can you give me an idea of what we'll be covering so I can be prepared? Would have cleared it up in seconds. Or think about relationships. Your partner says, "You never listen to me." If you jump to assumptions, you might get defensive. "That's not true, I always listen." But what if what they really meant was, "I feel like you're distracted when I talk and I need more of your focus"? That's not an attack. That's a request for connection. But if you assume it's an accusation, you'll react with defensiveness instead of curiosity and the fight begins. Clarity changes the game. You could respond with, "When you say I never listen, do you mean in general or do you mean right now I seem distracted?" That gives them the space to be specific and it gives you the chance to address the real issue instead of shadowboxing with assumptions. Clarity requires patience. It requires slowing down enough to ask, what exactly are they saying? And what exactly do they mean? Instead of just rushing to judgment. And patience isn't something most people are good at in communication. We live in a fast-paced world where everything is about speed, fast replies, fast reactions, fast decisions. But speed is the enemy of clarity. If you want to truly connect with people, you've got to be willing to take that extra beat to check your understanding. Another critical part of clarity is learning to recognize your own filters. Every one of us has a lens we see the world through, our past experiences, our wounds, our insecurities. If you grew up feeling ignored, you might interpret silence as rejection. If you've been betrayed, you might interpret distance as dishonesty. That's your filter at work, not necessarily reality. Getting clarity means acknowledging that your filter might not match their intention. It means separating what you feel from what they actually said and then checking with them before you decide how to react. At the end of the day, clarity over assumption saves relationships. It saves friendships, marriages, and workplaces from unnecessary conflict. It builds trust because people know you're not going to twist their words or jump to conclusions. You're going to take the time to understand them. It shows respect because you value their meaning more than your assumptions. And it gives you peace of mind because you're no longer wasting energy reacting to stories you made up in your head. So the challenge is this: every time you catch yourself about to assume, stop and ask. Don't just guess at someone's intention. Get clarity. Don't build a story. Get facts. Don't let your filter write the narrative. Let the other person tell you what they actually mean. Clarity over assumption isn't just a communication tip. It's a life skill. And the sooner you start practicing it, the sooner you'll stop creating problems that never needed to exist in the first place. Validation matters more than most people realize, and it's often the missing piece in conversations that leave people feeling frustrated, dismissed, or invisible. When someone opens up to you, whether it's a partner, a child, a coworker, or a friend, they're not just dumping words in your direction. They're handing you pieces of their thoughts, their fears, their feelings, and their perspective. And what they're really asking, without always saying it out loud, is, do you see me? Do you hear me? Do I matter? When you validate someone, you answer yes to all three of those questions. When you don't, you leave them hanging in emotional limbo, and that can feel worse than outright disagreement. Now, let's get something straight. Validation doesn't mean you agree with everything someone says. It doesn't mean you're endorsing their version of reality. It doesn't mean you're giving up your own perspective. Validation simply means you're acknowledging their experience as real and legitimate to them. If your partner says, I feel overwhelmed when you don't help out at home, validation doesn't mean you have to say, you're right, I never do anything. It means you respond with, I can see why that feels overwhelming, and I get that it's important to you. That's validation. You didn't surrender your side, but you did acknowledge that their feelings are valid and deserving of recognition. The problem is, most people don't know how to validate. They only know how to defend. The instinct is to jump straight to fixing, justifying, or counter-arguing. Someone says, I feel ignored, and the other person immediately fires back. That's not true. I was just busy, or you're too sensitive. Those are invalidating responses, and they shut the other person down. Over time, invalidation creates emotional distance. People stop sharing because they've learned they'll just get dismissed or corrected. The relationship becomes shallow with surface-level conversations and no real intimacy, because who wants to keep opening up if it just gets shot down? Validation, on the other hand, pulls people closer. It's like emotional glue. When someone feels validated, they feel understood, and that understanding is what keeps trust strong. Think about a time when you were upset and someone said, I get it. I'd probably feel the same way if I were in your shoes. How did that feel? Probably like a weight lifted. Even if nothing else changed, that's the power of validation. It soothes the emotional side of the brain and creates space for actual problem solving. Without validation, people stay stuck in defense mode, and no solutions ever land. Let's look at how this plays out in everyday situations. A teenager comes home and says, school is so stressful, I can't deal with it. A dismissive parent says, oh, please, you don't even know what stress is yet. Wait until you have bills to pay. That's invalidation. The kid walks away feeling minimized and unheard. A validating parent says, sounds like you're under a lot of pressure right now. Tell me more about what's making it feel overwhelming. Same situation. Two different responses, and the outcomes couldn't be more different. In one case, the kid shuts down, and the other, the kid feels safe to keep talking. Or take a workplace example. An employee says, I'm worried this project deadline isn't realistic. A boss who invalidates responds, that's your job. Figure it out. A boss who validates responds, I hear your concern about the deadline. Let's look at what resources or adjustments might help. The validating boss doesn't automatically agree to extend the deadline, but they acknowledge the concern, which keeps the employee engaged and motivated. The invalidating boss shuts the door on communication and risks creating resentment or burnout. Validation also matters in intimate relationships. Imagine your partner says, I felt hurt when you didn't call me back yesterday. If you jump to defensiveness, I was busy, why are you making such a big deal? You've just invalidated their experience. They're hurt, and you've told them they shouldn't be. A validating response might be, I get why that hurt. I can see you wanted to feel like a priority. I didn't mean to make you feel unimportant. That doesn't cost you anything to say, but it gives them everything they need emotionally. And once they feel validated, they're more open to hearing your side too. Here's the hard truth when you refuse to validate. What you're really saying is, my perspective matters, yours doesn't. You might not mean it that way, but that's how it lands. Validation flips that script. It says, your perspective matters even if it's different from mine. That simple shift can diffuse tension faster than any debate ever could. So how do you get better at validating? Start by listening without preparing your defense. Let their words sink in before you jump in. Pay attention to the emotion behind their words, not just the words themselves. If someone says, "I'm exhausted," don't respond with, "Well, I'm tired too." That turns it into a competition. Instead, respond with, "Sounds like you've been running on empty. That must be tough." If someone says, "I'm nervous about this presentation," don't respond with, "You'll be fine, don't worry." That minimizes their feeling. Instead, say, "I get that. It's natural to feel nervous when something matters." A validation is about empathy in action. It's about showing that you value how the other person feels, even if you see it differently. It's the bridge between listening and connecting. Without it, listening is incomplete. People don't just want their words to be heard, they want their emotions to be honored. And that's what validation delivers. If you make validation a habit, you'll notice a dramatic shift in your relationships. People will start to trust you more, open up more, and come to you with honesty instead of hiding behind walls. You'll diffuse conflicts faster, resolve problems more effectively, and build connections that are stronger and deeper. Because at the end of the day, everyone craves the same thing, to feel seen, heard, and understood. Validation is the way you give them that gift. And it might just be the single most powerful tool you'll ever learn in the art of active listening. Feedback closes the loop is the final key piece of active listening. And without it, the entire process is left hanging open. Think of a conversation like a circle. Someone shares their thoughts, you take them in, you interpret them, and then you reflect back to confirm that what you heard matches what they meant. If you skip that last part, the loop stays open and miscommunication has room to creep in. Feedback is the step that locks everything in place, making sure that the message the speaker intended is the message you actually received. And here's the truth. Most people are terrible at this. They assume they got it right, they move on, and then they're shocked when the other person later says, "That's not what I meant at all." The solution isn't complicated. You just have to give the feedback that confirms or corrects your understanding. Feedback isn't about parroting back every word like some kind of robot. It's about reflecting the essence of what you heard in your own words, then checking with the other person if you got it right. Let's say a coworker says, "I'm stressed about the new deadline." You could close the loop by saying, "So you're feeling pressure because the timeline feels too short. Is that right?" That simple reflection lets them know you're not just nodding along, you're tracking, you're processing, and you care enough to make sure you understand. If they say yes, exactly, you've closed the loop. If they say, not exactly, it's not the timeline, it's the lack of resources, then you've just saved yourself from walking away with the wrong impression. That's the power of feedback. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming silence equals understanding. Just because someone doesn't correct you in the moment doesn't mean you got it right. They might be too tired to clarify, too frustrated to argue, or too resigned to believe you'll ever listen properly. But inside they're walking away thinking, "They don't get me?" That silent resentment builds over time. And before long, the relationship is fractured. Feedback prevents that by creating a checkpoint in every important conversation. It says, "I'm not moving forward until I know we're on the same page." Think about how many arguments in relationships could be avoided if people just closed the loop. A partner says, "I feel like you don't make time for me." The other person jumps to defense. "What are you talking about? We had dinner last night." That's not closing the loop. That's reacting without verifying. A better move would be, what I'm hearing is that you want more consistent time together, not just an occasional dinner, right? Now the partner has the chance to confirm or clarify. Maybe what they really meant was, "I want more quality time without distractions," not just more time in general. Without feedback, you keep arguing about the wrong thing. With feedback, you cut through the noise and land on the real issue. The workplace is another arena where feedback is game-changing. Leaders often think they've communicated clearly, only to find out weeks later that their team misunderstood the assignment. Why? Because no one closed the loop. If a manager says, "We need this project wrapped up by Friday," and the employee just nods, there's no guarantee they both mean the same thing. Does wrapped up mean fully launched or just ready for review? Does Friday mean end of business Friday, or by Friday morning? Closing the loop could be as simple as the employee saying, "So just to confirm, you want the final draft on your desk by end of day Friday?" Correct. That one sentence saves everyone from confusion, frustration, and potential failure. Feedback is also critical when emotions are involved. When someone is upset, their words can come out messy, scattered, or charged with emotion. If you don't close the loop, you may latch onto the wrong part of their message and miss the heart of what they're really saying. For example, a teenager says, "I hate school. I'm done with it." If the parent reacts with, "You're not dropping out, end of story," they've completely missed the loop. A better approach would be, "Sounds like you're overwhelmed and frustrated. Are you saying you're struggling with the workload, or is it something else?" That feedback gives the teenager space to clarify, maybe saying, it's the social pressure, not the classes. Now the parent knows what's actually going on, and the conversation can move toward a solution. Closing the loop also builds trust because it shows respect. When you take the time to reflect back and ask, did I get that right? You're telling the other person, your words matter enough to me that I don't want to misinterpret them. That builds confidence in the relationship. People start to trust that when they speak to you, they'll actually be understood. That's powerful because trust is the foundation of every strong connection, whether personal or professional. Now, here's the pitfall. Feedback has to be genuine, not mechanical. If you use it like a script without actually listening, it comes across as fake. People can tell when you're just checking a box. The goal is not to sound like a therapist. The goal is to actually make sure you understand. That means listening fully first, then reflecting what stood out most and adjusting if the other person corrects you. It's a conversation, not a performance. Another trap is overcomplicating feedback. You don't need a long speech. A few simple phrases do the job. So what I hear you saying is, just to make sure I understand, it sounds like short, clear reflections are enough. The point is to verify, not to impress. At the end of the day, feedback closes the loop because it eliminates guesswork. It bridges the gap between intention and interpretation. It prevents small misunderstandings from turning into big problems. It builds trust, strengthens relationships, and makes communication smoother and more effective. If you really want to master the art of active listening, don't stop at hearing and nodding. Take the extra step, reflect, check, confirm. Close the loop. That's how you move from surface-level listening to real, meaningful connection.